Ken Whiting here with yet another paddling tip, and in this video I am talking about, well, the big mistakes in kayaking that unfortunately kill people. Now, before getting into the mistakes, let me start by saying one of the great things about kayaking is that it's a remarkably safe activity. The problem is, because you're on the water in a dynamic environment, when things do go wrong, they can go very, very wrong. And that's why you need to make good decisions and avoid these big mistakes. And so let's dive right into some of the biggest mistakes that kill people when kayaking. The first one is pretty simple, and it should go without saying, but unfortunately it doesn't go without saying, and that's to wear a PFD. Now, a buddy of mine who's also a YouTuber, Chad Hoover, he once told me that PFD doesn't stand for personal flotation device. It actually stands for pretty frickin' dumb if you don't wear one. And I love that because it's pretty frickin' dumb not to wear a PFD when you're paddling, even in very benign situations. The PFD is like a seatbelt in a vehicle. You know what? 99.9% of the time, you're not gonna need it. And you don't wear it, a seatbelt in your vehicle, for those 99.9% of the time. You wear it on the off chance that something does happen and go wrong, and then it is a life-saving piece of gear. And that is why the life jacket is so important, and if you're not wearing one all the time, you should wear one. And if you're not wearing one for a reason, like it's uncomfortable, it's too hot, well, there are solutions to that with paddling specific PFDs. The next big mistake people make is not dressing for immersion. And what I mean by that is not being dressed when paddling to be able to handle an unexpected swim. And it's the biggest problem when you have a warm day, but the water is still cold. The inclination might be to dress in the same clothes that you are wearing on the beach, sitting on the beach and soaking up the sun. But you might be comfortable paddling that way, but if you do end up swimming in cold water, well, that can quickly lead to hypothermia, which can become life-threatening surprisingly quickly. Now, I did a whole video about dressing for immersion, and I'll leave a link in the description box to that video. But quick version is, number one rule, don't wear cotton. Cotton doesn't insulate whatsoever. In fact, when it's wet, it actually draws heat from your body, makes you colder. So no cotton on the water. You want to wear synthetic fabrics, things, not just all synthetic fabrics, but because wool, merino wool is great, fleece, polypropylene, even spandex, fabrics that are designed to wick or pull moisture and water from the body and move it to the outside. They insulate well even when they're wet. You can also use something like a wetsuit, which does a great job of insulating both when it's dry and it's wet. And layers and shells, like can just be paddling jackets, a rain jacket, something simple like that, or dry suits or dry tops, something that actually, if you end up swimming, will keep you completely dry. What you wear really depends on the conditions that you're facing, how far away from shore you're going, so how long you'll be immersed in the water, a number of factors, and that's why I'm not going to get into it all right now. You can watch the other video for more information about that. So that brings us to the next big mistake that unfortunately leads to fatalities, and that is paddling further from shore than you can comfortably swim if you haven't practiced and aren't completely confident in your ability to re-enter the kayak from the water. And that means, really, it means practicing it. It means not just like, oh yeah, I'm strong enough, I'm athletic enough, I can get back in this kayak. No, until you've practiced it and you know for sure that you can get back into a kayak from the water, either by yourself if you're paddling alone, or with the help of a friend if you're paddling with somebody. But it goes beyond just practicing in flat water. Can you do that in the rough water that will probably lead to you capsizing in the first place? If you aren't 100% confident in your ability to get back into the kayak from the water, you have to stay close enough to shore so that you can comfortably swim to shore, ditch your gear, and get to shore, get to safety. Now, the next big mistake that people make, and this is probably one that leads to the most serious situations. Well, before we get into that, let me talk about something else safety related. This is something you can do right now to improve your safety on the water. The ACA, the American Canoe Association, put out 2 years ago a free online paddle sports safety course that you can take. It's actually a really cool course. I've done it and I highly recommend it, but they just released 3 new modules. They released a module for kayak fishing, a module for rescues on the water, and a module for nautical rules of the road. What are the rules of the road when you're on bodies of water that have powerboat traffic, other traffic? These new modules literally take minutes to do, but they are valuable refreshers for experienced paddlers or sources of information for inexperienced paddlers. Definitely worth taking the time to take the full course and these new modules. I am going to leave a link in the description box down below to those. But going back to the mistake that leads to a lot of problems is bad weather. The problem with bad weather is people often find themselves in a situation where they feel like they don't have a choice but to plug forward in bad weather to get back to their vehicle, to get wherever they need to go. And that might be because they haven't brought enough supplies to take a break, pull out on shore and hunker down, weather the storm, have a snack, just warm up and wait it out. Even if you're in a remote area, spend the night. Maybe an unexpected night out, but if you have the gear to be able to at least have a semi-comfortable night, unplanned night out, that can make the difference between charging forward through dangerous conditions. And those dangerous conditions are usually storms. And storms, they can be thunderstorms, and then you even have the risk of lightning. And when you're in open water, lightning is a real hazard. You are the highest thing on a big body of water when you're in the middle of it. And if you're holding a carbon paddle, that doesn't help either. But then you have windstorms, the wind that's associated with storms, wind that drums up waves. And there's so many things that can go wrong when you feel like you have to paddle through nasty conditions. And so the key there is A, stick to waters that are protected from wind and waves, and unless you have the skills to be able to deal with it. And B, have an emergency kit, some kind of kit that will let you pull out, take a break on shore, even spend the night on shore if you need to avoid having to paddle through terrible, dangerous conditions. Now, for those of you who paddle on rivers, another big mistake that can prove very costly is not understanding the dangers of dams and weirs and log jams in particular. Now, dams and weirs, some dams are not really a danger because you can't go near them. You're not allowed, they're fenced off, perfect. It's low-head dams and weirs that can pop up. Sometimes there's warning signs on the side of the river. Sometimes they're old decommissioned and there's still parts of the weir or dam are still there. These low-head dams and weirs can create these, what we call terminal hydraulics, which are these holes that they look very benign, but they're not. They let the water that comes in just recirculates and keeps recirculating. And so anything that goes in there, whether it's a boat, a swimmer, anything, is just going to get caught in this recirculating water. And it is one of the top reasons for fatalities on rivers around the world. Avoid low-head dams and weirs like the plague. Log jams on rivers are another big one. When the river is in high water, any fallen wood or debris is going to get pushed into a specific shoreline and it's going to pile up there. And that's why you get log jams. Paddlers, passive paddlers, will just get swept into those log jams themselves. And once you're in a log jam, There's not much you can do except just try to scramble to stay on top of it, get on top of it, get out. That's not what we're talking about right now. We're talking about avoiding log jams altogether. Understanding that every corner in a river, there is a potential for a log jam to be, in particular on the outside of the corner. And so when you're running a river, especially in higher water, when there's strong current, you have to be on hyper alert when you're coming around a corner for any kind of log or logs jam on the outside of the corner in particular. The other big mistake people make on rivers is standing up in current. Standing up in current can lead to something called a shallow water drowning. And what happens there is the bottom of a river is jumbled rocks, logs, who knows, you don't know what's going on down there. And if you step in there and your foot gets lodged, slips between a couple of rocks or a log and a rock or whatever, the power of the current is it's incredible. It's very surprising. And even in 2 or 3 feet of water, the current can knock you over. And it doesn't matter if you're wearing a life jacket or not. That current can flatten you in the water and you can't get out. Your foot is trapped. And that can lead to something called a shallow water drowning. If you're lucky, it might just lead to a broken leg. And so the rule, very simply, is don't stand up in fast moving water. You know, even if it means taking a few bumps on the knees and elbows, swim your way until you're in very shallow water right out of the main current before you think about standing up. Now, the last big mistake people make is the opposite of dressing for immersion. It's not protecting yourself from the heat. And that means protecting yourself from the sun. And I'm talking about a hat, I'm talking about sunscreen, I'm talking about a shirt a light shirt that stops the sun from just cooking you. And I'm talking about drinking enough water. It's amazing that when you paddle, you're surrounded by water. But drinking water is one of the most often overlooked things. And there's some great tools that you can get. If you're in fresh water, there are now water filters that you literally scoop up the water from the river or creek, whatever you're in, and press it right there. And in 5 seconds, you have a liter of filtered water. Salt water, not that easy. You need to bring your water, and cold water sure is nice too. The other thing that you can do to protect yourself from the heat on the water, if it's a really hot day and the water's really warm, you're not really gonna cool down too much in the water, well, do exactly what I said not to do when dressing for immersion, which is wear cotton. Wear a cotton shirt and get that cotton shirt wet, because that wet cotton shirt, it's gonna feel a little clammy. They're not actually very fun to paddle with, but it will have the effect of cooling you down. Well, there you have it, some big mistakes to avoid that can turn the surprisingly safe activity of kayaking into a nightmare. And so please don't you make those mistakes. I hope you found this helpful and you've learned something from it. Give it a video a thumbs up if you have, subscribe to Paddle TV, and stay tuned because I got lots more tips, paddling gear reviews, and paddling adventures coming your way.